How do you explain the noises? The others going missing.
Oh, hang on. Whoop, 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 whoop. Those noises. Doesn't take a professional actor to do them,
the
mate.
others going missing.
Oh,
the blood. The stuff hanging in the tree.
Yeah, how do we know that that was Steve?
We are talking the found footage, low budget British movie, There's Something in the Shadows. This is not to be confused with the similar titled Something in the Shadows, which came out in the same year. This one is written and directed by John Williams, who was the man behind the vampire movie Slayers, which I reviewed a short time ago. Now this looks to be a essentially zero budget found footage movie that kind of deals with a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot style creature, but in the UK. And it focuses on a group of YouTubers that have, you know, a paranormal sort of style channel, and they travel up to Scotland to try and find some type of cryptid, some type of paranormal activity. They actually go to Loch Ness, but this is not about the Loch Ness monster, probably because of budget reasons. But we do see Loch Ness, but it's more the main guy is kind of wanting to find some portals which he believes will, you know, be the kind of the catalyst to finding a variety of other paranormal phenomena. And he's joined by a few friends there who are there for kind of more just moral support. They don't really necessarily kind of believe what's going on, but they end up in the kind of like this forestry area in rural Scotland and come afoul of what appears to be a Sasquatch or Sasquatch-like creature that seem to be stalking them. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So I got this bears repeating. This is a practically zero budget movie. It reminds me a lot of another film which is very similar called Willow's Creek, which had a couple camping in the woods, which was also to do with a Sasquatch. Now that movie's Willow's Creek had no special effects in it, and this one is true of this film. You will see nothing in regards to Bigfoot or Sasquatch effects, so bear that in mind when you're watching this movie. This is why I say it's a zero budget film. That being said, you could argue that sometimes not showing anything is better than showing something really crap. There was a Bigfoot film I reviewed quite recently called Terror at Bigfoot Pond, I believe it was called, which had an absolutely awful looking kind of guy in an ape suit. And they would have been better not showing it. So this is kind of the approach that this movie has taken. But let's break it down. What can I say that works in this movie and what can I say that does not work? We'll start off with the positives. I actually thought some of the acting here wasn't bad. We have 5 characters, and I would say 4 out of the 5 do a good job. I'm not going to put out the one who doesn't, but there's one who overacts in this movie. But there are 4 out of these 5 actors I think do a really good job. My favourite was the character of Daz, who I think is the most realistic, and out of the characters here seems to be portrayed in a way that I would believe would be a genuine kind of response to kind of what is going on. So I actually thought the acting was pretty good, with the highlight being the character of Daz. Because I just felt the way he reacted and kind of then interacted with his kind of like his co-stars was the best. So the acting wasn't so bad. I do feel this movie has some pretty good sound design. Now, we don't see anything on screen, but we do have some kind of sound effects where we're hearing these things moving around and crying and stuff. And I actually thought the sound design worked quite well here. So I think the Foley effects and the kind of the use of sound effects works well in this movie's favour. So you do feel that there is kind of something lurking just off camera, although we don't see it. You know, it's obviously, we kind of know it's there, and we use our imagination to kind of fill in the blanks, kind of so to speak. So I did think that was quite good. The movie's second half is kind of takes it up a little bit in regards to the pacing in the movie. I think this movie is a little mixed on pacing. The second half as you'd probably expect, to be fair, because obviously the danger level is heightened as the film goes on. And it gets a little bit more interesting, I would say, the second half of the film. And we're going to come on to the first in just a moment here. And it's kind of like what you would expect. This is potentially a good or a bad thing. This movie is kind of what you're going to expect from a very, very low budget found footage movie. It's going to, if you've seen a number of these films, and it's very much like Willow's Creek. So if you kind of liked Willow's Creek, you could probably like this one. But it doesn't really offer anything new. And that's kind of where we're going to kind of like move on to maybe what doesn't work. This movie is just, story-wise, a cookie-cutter found footage movie that doesn't have any budget. Found footage is a good way for filmmakers to get around low budget situations, but there are a number of pitfalls that it also creates. Now, one of them is, because there's no budget, visually this movie is pretty generic looking. It is 5 guys walking around in the forest having some conversations. That is the movie. Like I said, there's a couple of like sequences where we hear some good sound effects, and the kind of the atmosphere that it sets up, I think, kind of works well in certain ways. But film is a visual medium, and despite the fact this is obviously because of a low budget, and I think it wisely has, no special effects rather than crappy ones, so I will say that. But nonetheless, I think people will feel that they're shortchanged when we are literally seeing really nothing on screen, with the exception of one thing which I'm going to come on to in just a minute. But yeah, it's kind of visually not all that interesting. And it's, like I said, it's just guys walking around the forest. Now, I've mentioned I thought the second half was kind of amped it up a bit. But let me talk about the first half. Now, another danger of found footage movies is that they can come across like watching other people's holiday videos. I've seen this in a couple of other reviews. Now, just imagine this. If someone says to you, some random person you've never met, do you want to watch like 45 minutes of my holiday videos? What are you going to say? You're going to say, hell no, that sounds boring AF. I don't even want to watch my actual family's holiday videos, to be honest with you, let alone some randos. And therein lies the problem with a lot of found footage movies, is because it feels like this. And this movie, the first half of it at least, feels like that. Now, I appreciate you have to have characterizations and things like this, but the trap that I feel found footage movies make sometimes is that the first half is just people kind of like milling around doing their own thing and doesn't really have any story in it, and it's just quote unquote character development. But it is literally like watching someone's holiday video. It is boring. And I have to say, I didn't think our characters were particularly well fleshed out. So they don't seem particularly distinct, I must say. Like I said, the one character who I felt did the best job was Daz, but that isn't really apparent until the second half of the movie. And then, like I've said, I think 4 out of the 5 actors did a good job. There's one actor here who I'm not going to point out, but I think overacts and kind of does a kind of like quirky kind of like off-kilter thing. Just turned up a little bit too much, where it's kind of like, it doesn't really seem realistic. It kind of seems like a cartoon character, whilst everyone else is at least playing it kind of like moderately, moderately kind of realistic. The story itself is nothing new. I mean, you don't have a lot of budget, I understand that, but it is just campers out in the woods hearing things. Oh my god, what is it? We can't see anything. It's that. The story is nothing new. Like I've said, it's practically the same as Willow's Creek. It's not necessarily a bad story, but it's not a complex one. It's not one that we haven't seen a million times before. There is one quasi-visual effect. The only thing we see on screen is we see a pair of glowing eyes right towards the end. But even this has its problems, because after making a film, they've clearly noticed you've seen just the guy holding 2 lights, and they've had to kind of like cut and paste like a black blob that kind of covers it up. So you can obviously see this kind of like this like rectangular blob underneath these lights to try and kind of hide the fact that there's obviously just a guy there with 2 lights, but all you see is instead is like a kind of like a rectangular line and where it keeps moving and try and hide the fact that there is obviously someone there holding these lights. So the one effect that they did make, they still managed to kind of unfortunately bodge up to some degree. So should you see this movie? If you're a huge Bigfoot fan, you may want to go and watch it because, like I've said, I don't think it's necessarily a badly made film. It's just unimaginative and unoriginal at the end of the day, and also unspectacular because it really doesn't show anything, to be honest. But nonetheless, I feel that there are worse films than this that have been made on the same subject matter. I feel at least this movie has the sense not to try and show a crappy monster, and I do think it does a good job at least of having some elements where you do feel a little bit of kind of atmosphere, and I like some of the portrayal of at least some of the characters here. I feel I did a decent enough job, but it's nothing new. It's completely lackluster and kind of no frills in regards to this type of found footage movie. So I'll give it a slightly below average mark for me, a 4 out of 10. Not a bad film, but just super generic at the end of the day. Have you seen it? Would you see it? Leave me a